Clormo with part 6 of my Logic Pro X tutorial series, and part number 6 is nothing more than sampling bass lines and dealing with sampled bass lines. Two things that I want to cover in this video. The first thing will be recap everything that we have done in previous tutorials and see how that applies to your sampled bass lines and how you can use it. And then the second thing, like part B of this tutorial itself, will be how to take all those elements from a sample, be it a bassline or a sample that has a bassline that you want to extract from, and actually play it yourself if you want to get more a cleaner sound and you want to use a software bass instrument to play over or recreate or transpose that bassline that's embedded in a much busier or full song sample. And the obligatory note when I go through the recap, make sure that to understand and to remember that what I'll be doing here applies not just to bass lines, it applies to every other sound that you can put in Logic or on your beat. So keep that in mind, take notes, practice it, train your ear to make sure that you get more proficient at these commands so that you make a more efficient workflow that will help you in creating your sample beats and any other beat or music arrangement in general. So let's go right into the tutorial. For one, to start, I have 3 tracks here. My first track has a sample that has a bass line that I want to extract. Second track has just an ample loop with just a bassline play or melody. And track number 3 is a software instrument with some MIDI notes for a bass line that will tie to track number 1, but I'll get to that later. So I have this sample here in track number 1 that has many other musical elements because it's just a song sample. But I don't want to say it's extremely obvious that I can hear the bass line, but you can clearly hear it in my view. So I'm gonna play it, and if you disagree, please leave a comment in the video, but here it is. So there's 2 notes for the bass line. That's 4 notes. I'm just saying that so you figure yourself where the bass goes. Another one. So I think that's fair to say that you can hear the bass line of this sample that has other stuff. So I want to extract that from there. And for one, how you can extract this bass line from here, for one, you can just plain and simple just use a channel EQ to do that. Logic Pro X has a pretty good channel EQ, or I want to say a simple to understand and use channel EQ. And I'm going to show you how to do that pretty simple. Again, the EQing tutorial will be in a separate video. In fact, it's part number 7. It's going to talk specifically about EQ, effects on tracks like reverb, pitch, and many other different run-of-the-mill or go-to effects that you should be using when making sample beats or any musical arrangement or sound or beat in general. But now going back to EQing this sample to highlight and extract your bass line from it, all I need to do is, in this case, start with a low pass filter to accentuate or let the low frequencies pass through this filter and muting or sweeping and taking off my high frequencies, and that it's a good starting point for you to lay or obtain or get a good sample of the bassline itself. And the reason that you should want to do that, it's because that's really the original bassline that was played with this song, right? So it's a good starting point to just use that. That's not to say that you can use a completely different bassline sample or play something completely different on a bassline or get somebody to just play it for you, but it's a good starting point. And more often than not, you're gonna find yourself that going back to the original bassline, if you can identify from a sample, is a good idea. So to do that, I'm just gonna double click my EQ thumbnail, and at this point I already had my channel EQ there, but if there's nothing and you double click in the thumbnail, it's gonna bring up a channel EQ by default. So make sure the analyzer is turned on. At this point it's turned off. If I click it and it's bright, right, it's on, and then you can zoom in and out by clicking and dragging here in this in the left side. So what I'm gonna do is I'll zoom it out a little bit, and now I'm gonna play again so I don't like see some of the frequencies. So I'm gonna zoom in so I can see them better, and notice every time the bass key is playing, there's one, there's the other one. So you notice right away, first lesson tied to EQing, it's that your low frequencies are usually in this range. So if you don't know anything about EQ, that's something that you should research a little bit in Google, what the different frequency bands are and what typical instruments would fall under those frequencies. So your bass would fall around this area here that highlights every time I move my cursor. So low pass filter would be the eighth band in my channel EQ, which is this one here that's off. I'm gonna turn it on, and the opposite would be your high pass filter, which would be here, and it's a low pass filter because it's letting the low frequencies pass through this sweep that I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna hit play again. I'm gonna shut up and just do it. So notice that by doing that, I took a good chunk out of the other elements of the sample that were from this region to the right, my higher frequencies. Now, another thing that I want to do is, you see this slope here, you can control that slope if you highlight your filter and you click on it, on this dot here. I can come here and this would be the slope, right? And I can just either change that, or, well, actually it would be, here would be my slope, sorry about that. So that controls my slope, and I can make it a little bit sharper so I don't mess anything else around. If I play that again, pretty much you just hear the bass line only. I can still, if you pay close attention or turn up the volume a little bit, you're gonna faintly hear the other frequencies, but that's a good starting point to sample a bass line that's clear in a chop already that you have for a sample, and taking it off. And consequently, you can also just do a little bit of shelving EQ in this band number 2, and just put the lot a little bit, you know, just turn it up a few notches, and let's play that. Or you can use your third band, because you see that the curves are here, right? So if I just you don't want to get too crazy either. We're just making this very loud, but I don't know what your opinion is, but I think that's a very easy way and a very clear way to get a bass line already out of the sample that I had. So I haven't seen many people in videos just going in and explaining this in a simple manner. Just, hey, this is your low pass, these are your bands, and all you need to do is just visualize the frequencies, get rid of the high ones, and accentuate the low ones as you can see them. That's the simplest way of doing that. So just to give you another quick reference, I'm gonna duplicate this this track, put my sample again there, but I'm gonna turn off this EQ because I just wanted this to sound like my normal sample. And let's listen to both together. I can still listen the bass line even clearer because I did all of that EQ work in my first track, right? And in a similar way, I can just go into the EQ for this. I'm gonna keep it off, but if I keep solo this and play it, I turn off my filters, I could come and start dealing with the other frequencies that I want to accentuate, and even take off some of the frequencies that just sound off from the sample. And that can happen because you have a bad quality sample and so on and so forth. So it's a good way of extracting a bassline from a more busy sample, and a good starting point for your sample beat bassline. So with that done there, I'm gonna mute it. I'm gonna turn on mute my pure bassline with an Apple loop. I'm gonna play it. Notice I have no EQ on it, and that's not its original tempo, but I'm gonna keep it as that, so I don't want to go back and forth. But what can you do here? You can obviously, for one, just use it as is and just put some effects on it and some EQ and put it in a different sample. But you can also, I'm gonna turn off this just in case, but also you can go to your Apple Loops library and choose something from there. If just to recap, every sample here shows you at what key was played at, so that's gonna come in handy when I start talking about track number 3. But that's also a good way to train your musical knowledge, your music theory knowledge, and your ear, as usual, to find something that meshes well with the key that this original sample is played at. Granted, I have it pitched just because I don't want any problems, but let's say that more than just using what you have, you found from a library or your Apple Loops, let's say that you only had one of the notes from this bass line. That's your sample. That's the only thing that you were able to sample, or you were listening to something and you like that note, and let's say I'm just gonna take that bass note. And this is when we're gonna go a little bit back and do some recap of our previous tutorial. So let me play that once again. So let's say I want that very first note. I'm gonna zoom in because this is, wow, this is all crushed. A lot of compression apparently was used to that, so that's good. Just gonna find it with my marquee tool, find a transient there. Let's see. It's not that good. Let me play again. Let's just cut it there. Let's just cut that note out. I'm gonna mute this. Let's say you only had that. So I ask you before I do it, what do you think would be a good way of having a bass instrument out of this line? You give up? Well, you can put this in a sampler instrument, right? So I'm gonna right click it and let's say convert to new sampler track, and I'm gonna call this tutorial bass instrument, or I'm gonna say sampler. I'm gonna say region because it's just one region, gonna be one zone. The width is gonna be one note, one zone. And there's my new bassline sampler. I'm gonna delete that. I'm gonna go to my ESX24. Again, I'm going very fast through all of this because this has been previously covered. And now you see that in here I have my note, right? And I probably didn't chop it that well. I should have probably chopped a little bit better, but you saw that all that compression, my marquee tool wasn't working that well. So let's say that in a perfect world and with a better sample, I had this playing full here. Just imagine that it's playing even more. I'm gonna do is just drag this. I'm gonna cover a couple of octaves. So let's. And then obviously clipping because I didn't turn down the volume. What a rookie. This is processor intensive, you know, make sure that you have a good processor because it sometimes can act this way, but I have a few different pitch notes there from one sample, so that's gonna help me if I have something that's in a different, if I have a sample that's in a different key than the a pure baseline sample that I have, like in this case in a separate track. It's gonna help me with the key, and I'm gonna cover that in another tutorial, as I have said before, like tuning samples and finding at what key is being played at. But that's a very simple way. I already have created sort of a software instrument baseline that I can also use as a reference. I'm gonna save it, and that's another good way of having a good starting point for a baseline for your beat. And now last but not least, the meat and potatoes. God, I hate that phrase. But the meat and potatoes of this tutorial will be, what if I wanted to play the baseline of a sample that I have? Let's go back and refer to track number 1 where I can listen to or identify the baseline. And it's a simple baseline tool. It's the 2 notes. So yes, you guessed it, this here is just me playing this over. But it's good that you pay attention because I'm gonna go back also and recap some of the other stuff that we have seen in previous tutorials to help you in getting there. In this case, I want to play a bass line. Let's say I just have a sample, I hear the bass line, and I say, well, that's I think I can play that. Or I can just put some of the notes in the piano roll. So why don't I give it a try? And that's what I have done in this case for this example. So I'm gonna unmute that track with the MIDI notes, and I'm gonna unmute this and mute the sample, and let's take a listen to it. And the reason it sounds like that is because it's at a different pitch, because I wanted to make the contrast. But when you are doing this, you again will end up training your ear to find the exact note, the exact key of it, and that way you're gonna have your bass line being played by a software instrument as opposed to in the sample, and you can probably just get rid of the low frequencies and let the software instrument do that work for you. Also keep in mind that I have this pitch, and you know, I just wanted to make sure that the contrast is present. So how did I get here? How do you get here? I'm gonna mute that. I'm gonna unmute the sample for 1. A good thing to do, not only with bass lines, but with any other thing, is turning on your flex time. Oops. So what I want to do, I'm gonna chop this first. Well, I don't really need to chop it because it's already, the cycle is set. Anyway, so the first thing you can do is enable the flex time. Why is that? If you have been paying attention, one thing that you can do is lower the tempo of that sample, and obviously what is that gonna do? It's gonna play it slower, and by playing it slower, you are gonna have a better time at finding the bass notes that are playing if you want to play it in real time, for example. But if you don't want to play it in real time, the flex time is gonna help you with the transient. So both things in combination are gonna help you just get here. How? Well, let's just open the piano roll to give it a try. With my piano roll open, you see the notes. It's muted, but let's listen how this plays out. And maybe that's too slow, so I'm gonna bring it to 45. And when I hit play, pay attention to the bass notes. Quite simple, right? I was paying attention to where the playhead or the transient was when the note for the bass line came, and all I did was, I'm gonna delete some of these notes, is just went here with my command click, and that turns out the pencil, and I just clicked there, and I had my notes, my, at least the correct measurement, or the correct where at what part of the 4 bars those notes were coming up. And I know that I want to make here at this point, when you're just building it, if you have it muted, first of all, it's not gonna make any sound. So don't get too caught up in the first try finding the key, especially if you have never done it before. You're not gonna probably be able to do that unless you're a prodigy or you just got lucky. I'm gonna be honest here. But don't worry about the key. Don't worry about the pitch, right? The key where the notes are. Just make sure that you hit them. Make sure that you hit the notes, because this is just a not saying bass line as the term for the instrument or the melody that a bass instrument does, but it's your bass line to start building upon for your bass sound. And again, you can probably go with something like this that's simple, but in the case that you have something a little bit more complex with a few more notes, then just hitting where they are will be aided by lowering your tempo after enabling the flex, and paying attention to either your playhead here down at the piano roll, or just if you have your transients pretty easily identifiable where every bass note comes, then you'll be able to just hit each one manually. Let's try that, right? So you notice that this transient here is my first bass note where it goes, so I can just move the playhead myself to that transient, and then come down here and make sure that my MIDI note is squared with that to that measurement there where it's playing. And same thing, just by looking at the transients, you probably have figured out, if you have been paying attention to how to do this, and you have gone through the exercise in my previous tutorials, you probably, just by seeing it, the transients will have a better idea of where those notes are and not have to play it or make it more slower. But for those that haven't, or for those that have still problems with relating a transient marker with a note, which is not easy either, because this has other instruments. I'm not saying that I would have noticed it right away. So for those of you and me that have the problem, doing this with the tempo and the flex time will also help you to play or construct a MIDI bass line with a software instrument right away. And then obviously after you have that, you can go into your EQing and effects and mixing, and get and fully flesh out that bassline melody and put it in your beat. So I'm gonna turn off that piano roll. I'm gonna turn on mute that, and now let's I'm just gonna quickly do some basic stuff. I'm gonna just take off some of those, most of the low end, and just exaggerate a little bit on the high, and let's listen the combination. You will hear that contrast because it's at a different key, but once you find the right key, it will flash and mesh as good or close to what the original sample had. So let's take a maybe I should just use a faster tempo. I don't want to keep you guys here 3 hours just to listen to that. So I really didn't hear the bass line from the original sample in that instance. Obviously it sounds like crap because it's at a different octave, and let me just try something. And no matter where I move it, I just realized no matter where I move it, it's gonna work because I just used the AU pitch effect here, so I pretty much threw it out of tune. But anyway, that's not important. The important part here is that trick there, that technique will help you also construct your own MIDI bass lines. So that's it for this tutorial, part number 7. I'm gonna go through some basic EQing, some basic concepts, some reverb, other effects that are good to know or good to have for sample beats or any other beat or musical arrangement when you're putting it together for the first time, or where you are a beginner level type of producer, you know, that you just want to get comfortable with doing it. And in fact, I think that part number 7 will probably be the last separate topic part of the tutorial series, and then part number 8 itself will be me constructing a sample beat from start to finish with all the topics that we have reviewed in tutorials parts 1 through 7. So thank you for watching. Once again, thanks for the new subscribers. They're not many, but thanks anyways. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button. Regardless if you liked it or not, please help me spread the word by sharing this video. You can leave a comment in the comment section if you liked it, if you had any questions, if you want to say anything, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so to stay up to date in all the other videos and future tutorial series that I intend to be releasing. Also, make sure to follow me on social media: Twitter, Facebook, SoundCloud, Instagram, and my webpage www.clormoindustries.com, and my email for serious inquiries, beat requests, promos, collaborations, questions. Please no spam. My email, clormoindustries@gmail.com. Thank you once again for watching. See you in part number 7. Peace out, YouTube.